Hi, this is Astro Indicator Update, Excursions into Practical Astrology. My name is Stephen, and this is episode 34. And today's date is Saturday, April 11th. And today we're going to look at Bill Gates' astrology, mostly just because I am just curious. I just wanted to see what it looked like, and I have some extra comments to make about interpretations in general, because it came up when I started looking at his chart. We'll look at the markets we usually look at: the Dow Jones, gold, silver, Bitcoin, the dollar, and then I have some recommendations. This sort of has come up because of some comments people have made, but I have some books on astrology that I think are good, and books on stress management that personally I have found to be of great value. Okay, here is Bill's chart. And as most people know, he is very much involved in researching pandemics, in promoting vaccines for viruses, things like that. You know, he was involved with Microsoft, founded Microsoft. And so most people know him on that basis. Well, this is like, as we normally do, this is his natal chart in this inner ring right here. The transits are in the outer ring. The planets where they're positioned in the sky right now are here. And once I started looking at his chart, I realized that it might be a difficult interpretation for me because of just an inherent conflict in our chemistry. Once you start studying astrology, you start seeing certain patterns and comparing charts, and it's easy to spot when two people may not have the best chemistry. And I could see that very quickly between his chart and my own, which I hadn't seen before until a couple days ago. We have what I call mutual Saturn clashes, where Saturn in each of our charts is in a hard aspect with a personal planet in the other person's chart. It's as if I put my chart in this outer ring and compared the positions to his natal chart. And I could see that this was going to be tough. And so I call this the bias factor in interpretation. And I think when you're looking at charts, a person just has to call it and say, this is a tough one. Maybe I should recuse myself of interpreting this chart because I have an inherent reaction to this person's personality. So I'm going to try to be as neutral as possible here, given all that. But let's look at his chart. So Bill, right off the bat, you see this is Jupiter and Pluto together in the second house. A person cannot have a better combination for making a lot of money, in my estimation. The second house deals with money and values and so forth. And here he has the planet of success and good fortune combined and working with Pluto, which deals with big corporations, accumulating a lot of power. And in the second house, it's probably very helpful for accumulating a lot of money. So, I mean, he wasn't, I don't think he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, but he was born with an aspect that really helped him. I mean, I can't say, it was fated, but it really assisted him in being skillful at growing his, and his ability to grow his wealth. So he's a Scorpio. Here's his sun down here. He's a Scorpio, Venus in Scorpio. This person has a lot of will and determination to get what he wants. He has Cancer rising. The ruler of Cancer is the moon. He has it in Aries. He is sort of a pioneer. He knows how to get things started. He has the energy to initiate projects. Plus, he's probably a very good salesperson. If he had done something else, he would always be probably very good in that capacity. What else? Well, not to get too detailed in this, he does have what's called a T-square of Uranus, Chiron. And I could probably be drawing some of these a little bit. Let me see if I can get this going here. So he has Uranus opposite Chiron, but they are in a square position to, which basically is a conjunction of Neptune and the Sun down here. Particularly if we use the midpoint between these two, it's in a T-square with these other factors. So you're tying together Uranus, which is the kind of the unconventional, original, nonconformist, creative, computer-oriented energy with his identity. It's being highly stimulated, okay? I don't look at squares as always being bad, but there's a big emphasis going on in this chart with this conjunction down here, Neptune and the Sun. And so I'll get into that a little bit more because this is where my bias can kick in somewhat. So I've gone through, he has got a Neptune accent in other ways as well. I mean, it's in a T-square like that, but it is also considered a leading planet in his chart because it rose on the day that he was born. It rose over the eastern horizon just prior to this the Sun coming up on that particular day, and it's in fairly close approximation to proximity with his Sun. So it's a strongly accented element in his chart. Strong Neptune placement. I've kind of talked about these. So what is coming up in by transit? I know this is ridiculously too quick, but let's look at his transits for a second. He has an important element or an important transit somewhat occurring now, which is going to increase next year. And that is, he's got Saturn by transit. It is transiting his midpoint between these two planets, but it's going to exactly transit his Sun next year, okay, by square. So this is more challenging. I think I've talked about this recently. Who was I talking? I can't remember. In a previous video, who was having a Saturn square. Oh, it was Joe Biden. He has a Saturn. He's going through a Saturn transit right now. Well, Bill increasingly is going to go into one. And so some of the things that he wants to accomplish are going to be increasingly more difficult for him over the next year. That, generally speaking, I think often occurs with a Saturn transit like this. So keep that in mind. In addition to this, by transit, he is going through, by transit, he's going through a Uranus transit, which is exactly opposite his Sun right now and will be for most of the year. And so not only is he experiencing maybe increasing frustration on one level, but his sense of identity, his Sun, is going through some real changes as well. He may be taking on, I'm guessing, this is my guess, he may be taking on more than, ultimately he will want to take on. I mean, this is a freedom-generating energy of wanting to kind of cut loose and do your own thing and not be burdened by, some of the responsibilities of the world. And so it's going to be interesting to go. This is very rare. This transit, a strong transit like this is only going to happen every. If I take squares into consideration, every 20 years or something. So this is sort of rare, and we'll see what happens in his life. But he has I could summarize. I mean, he really has a chart of someone who can make a lot of money, who's interested in high tech, leading edge stuff. He's a very good salesman, very strong-willed. And he has a strong Neptune, and we're going to get into that in just a minute. Neptune down here. So I'm not going to continue. I've got this video would be too long, but I also wanted to, in addition just to talking about his chart, his transits, I wanted to bring in this bias factor, because I'm not going to go into how his chart intersects with my own, but immediately I could say that I was going to lean in the direction of kind of more negatively interpreting some of the aspects of his chart, because I could see our chemistry was not really too compatible. So let's talk about that just for a second. And this is called the bias factor interpretations. And the example just immediately I had was multiple Saturn interaspects mutually happening between his astrology and my own astrology. And how can that affect a person? Well, then you might just see things through sort of colored glasses when you are attempting to analyze a person's chart. And for example, Neptune is strong in his chart. It was the leading planet, just rose, was more visible on the day that he was born, rose just prior to his sun rising. So what are some of the positive meanings of Neptune on a spectrum between positive and negative? And nobody hangs out all the way on the positive side or all the way on the negative side, generally speaking. Everybody who I know has a strong Neptune, maybe a strong Pisces, has some combination of these things, but maybe the proportion might be 10-1 positive or vice versa. But let's look at these. They're positive, they're compassionate, there's some sort of spiritual connection that they have with the world. They're very idealistic, intuitive, artistic, imaginative, and sometimes they have some orientation to the pharmaceutical industry or medicine. Let's just put it that way. On the other extreme end, they can be, overly impressionable, impractical, scattered, confused, deceptive, deceitful, and they may be attracted to mind-altering chemicals of some sort. So again, he was a tough one. I just had to bring this up, and I'm just sharing this with you, in that if there is an element of my own astrology involved when I look at these things, and I would like to try to be as objective as possible, and sometimes it's it's difficult. So let's move on. But if you're an astrologer, if you're into astrology, you need to think about this, when you're looking at somebody else's chart. So let's move on to the markets. Oh, I was going to add this. I forgot I had this in there. For people who want to study astrology a little bit more, I've been doing it for 40, 50 years, and so I go way back to reading Dane Rudyard books and Carter and people who were writing in the 50s and 60s and prior to that. But here are two authors who have written a lot of books, going all the way back to the 70s into the 90s. They wrote books. And one of them is Stephen Arroyo, and he has a master's degree in counseling. And so he's very good at, not being theoretical. He has a very empirical basis for, much of his understanding of astrology. So look up Stephen Arroyo. This is a particularly good book. I don't have it listed here, but Astrology and Transformation is quite good, and his one on relationships is also excellent. Here's another person who I think is maybe a little bit more appropriate for beginning, students of astrology, and that's Stephen Forrest. And I would start with this one, and this one is also very good. It deals with transits. Okay, now let's move on to the markets, because we have a lot of stuff going on here. And so this particular, again, I combine technical analysis with the astrology with the fundamentals when I can, and try to see which is maybe the overriding factor. The horizontal lines are support and resistance lines. The vertical lines relate to the astrology. And these are ones that I've talked about in the past. These are ones coming up. So this particular line, let's see, right here was very strong and historically very bullish. And it didn't do anything. It bumped right up against this trend line I've drawn in here. And it didn't do anything, and there was sort of a delay, which is really tough, but I think it was involved with this eventual pop that we had through the trend line up into this area here where you see this green line. That green line is 50% of the move down. So you can calculate the total move down, figure out what half of it is, and very often in a market like this, it will bounce up to the 50% line, and then you have sort of a deciding moment. Do we continue, or do we start to reverse and head back in the direction of the trend? Well, we can get a little bit of an inkling of what's going on by looking at the candle. That little, I know I've kind of gotten a long-term view of this daily chart, but you can see this candle right here. And it is called, in the candlestick world of technical analysis, it is called, I think, would be called a spinning top, or a doji possibly. But it represents, in the psychology of the trading market in general, uncertainty or indecision. They know that they're hitting maybe the limit to this bounce. At least that's how I am interpreting it right now. And this past, let me look where my notes are. Yeah, this past Wednesday, so that was Thursday, that spinning top. We had something on Wednesday that was bullish. But we're starting to get away from that bullish energy back here, and we're moving into more of volatility and more reversal energy. And this even continues when we get up to the 21st. Volatility, and maybe that's the most accurate way of saying it, but also if we trade sideways, and this is what to look out for, if we sort of trade sideways and we get up to the 21st, the astrology indicates that we're probably going to come back down. Okay, if we get all the way out into May 8th, then there is potentially some bullish energy kicking in. But that's a long ways away. It's a long ways away. A lot can happen. Look at what happened just between this period of time. A lot can happen between there and here, or wherever we might be. So again, the 21st looks to me like it could be a point where we could head down. But try to, combine all the factors in your analysis. Okay, let's look at gold. Gold has fundamentals that are excellent right now. The premiums, I'm buying the real thing. If you try to go to a dealer, are $180 above what's called the spot price. So, right now it's listed at $16.94. Well, you couldn't buy a 1 ounce silver coin, or 1 ounce gold coin for, anywhere from it'd be close to $1,900 probably if I looked today. It's also broken out above what I consider the resistance line. It also looks like we broke above what is called a head and shoulders pattern. This, dip up, big dip, dip back down and through. So on the technical level, on the fundamental level, gold has a lot going for it. In addition, when we come up, we've got a little time involved here. When I look at, I haven't drawn it in, but April 16th, April 20th, which is this line, and at April 23rd, which is this last line. Historically, all of these things lean in the direction of bullishness, of strong movement upwards. It doesn't always happen that way, and it can just mean a significant movement happening on that day. But on the whole, particularly this last one, is usually a very bullish sign. So everything in this market looks like it. The odds are quite high that this rally will continue. This is not trading advice. I'm just sharing with you my research. Okay, silver. Silver is lagging behind. It's a precious metal, but also an industrial metal, and everything is shut down in the world. However, many mines are shut down, as I've said in the past. Refineries, some of them are still shut down. So acquiring silver, like gold, is difficult. If you try to order it online right now, there's a waiting period. So that too is, the demand is strong and the supply is low. What does the astrology say? Well, on the 13th, let me look at my notes. We have sort of, it seems to me that in general, silver is going to be reacting to gold's movement primarily over the next month, because the astrology isn't as strong relative to gold with silver. I mean, silver had some very strong astrology factors back here, like particularly around March 25th, and then that was classic reversal elements in astrology taking place. And I think it's going to ride the coattails of gold, particularly when it breaks this trend line right here. I don't see any reversal patterns happening, but they're just sort of, I would say, B-grade bullish astrology dates approaching here. Okay, Bitcoin. Okay, Bitcoin's a tricky one. In the world of hard money, where potentially you would move to hard assets to offset a devaluation in your local currency because of excess money printing, or specifically, you would first go to gold and silver. But if you can't get your hands on gold and silver, which is somewhat more difficult right now, Bitcoin, I think, personally, is an alternative because of the restrictions on its on the amounts that are being produced, and in particular, just in 2 or 3 weeks' time, they're even going to, built into the Bitcoin protocol, is to reduce the amount of Bitcoin that's produced every 4 years. Every 4 years, they have what's called a halving, and in May, that is taking place. And so just the amount of Bitcoin that's available is going to be reduced. So that's the fundamental picture of Bitcoin. We're having a pullback. We had a pullback yesterday. I think it's sort of come back to this support line. it could come back and use this trend line as support. But then the astrology is not great with Bitcoin. We have a big gap going on here. And, I can kind of look ahead and say that maybe out, particularly in late April, early May, we have some energy in the astrological side of things that could create a bounce. So we'll have to just watch this. When this happens, you want to play the technicals, concentrate on the technicals and fundamentals more than the astrology. That's the guideline here. Concentrate on the technicals and the fundamentals more than the astrology when there's nothing happening in the astrology. And so look at these support lines, okay? And we're not overbought by any stretch. We should stay, maybe just trade sideways until we get out in this area. But very conceivably, potentially in this position, I could see us trading up to the 65-day moving average and back down again for a while. Okay, U.S. dollar. Let me get my notes out, because this is an interesting chart, because I think I said on my last video that this could be intermediate high right there where my cursor is, and it's kind of proving to be the case. But on the 21st, which is this one right here on this line, we have normally a very bullish day approaching. So possibly the dollar could trade down to the 21st and get a bounce. And then if you come all the way out into May, there is some energy out there that also supports it. So to tell you the truth, I think, even though it's illogical, given how much money is being printed by the Fed and everything, the dollar could just stay high because it trades relative to other currencies, and other countries are also printing a lot of money, and other currencies are also being devalued, and there's a lot of debt in the world which needs to be paid off in dollars. So until those things kind of play out, until some of this money printing starts circulating into the system, it may not really affect the dollar too much. And so, I think it could trade down, but mostly just trade sideways. That's, sort of my appraisal at the moment. So finally, in this video, I want to talk about one tool that I used to teach. I have a background in psychology, transpersonal psychology as well. And I used to teach focusing. I've been doing it, and I used to teach it way back in the 1980s, which is, sounds like a million years ago. But this is a very good tool that's not difficult to learn. It's inexpensive. I learned it mostly from reading this book and getting some books by other people as well. But this fellow developed it. He's a professor of psychology and philosophy. He was a professor at the University of Chicago. And he wrote this book for the layperson, well written. Now this book is really inexpensive. I think this may be a better quality of it. But focusing is a way to help a person manage. It's beneficial for a number of things, but I would say primarily it's known for helping a person kind of better manage their emotions and learn about what really might be driving their emotional state, and in the process relieve a sense of pressure that may have been undermining kind of their ability to think well and behave well and interact with others in a way that they would like. So I won't go into a lot of it, but you can just do your own research on focusing. It's not difficult to learn. Once you learn it, it takes some practice. Give yourself some time to practice it a little bit like anything else. But once you gain some facility with focusing, you become much more self-sufficient in helping to maintain a state of mental health that will benefit you in many, many areas. So I really admire what Gentleman did, and I think focusing is sort of has universal value because we all have our ups and downs on the emotional side of things, and focusing is excellent for giving us clarity and insight, and for rebalancing ourselves, recentering ourselves when we need it. So anyway, that's it for today. Again, my name is Stephen. I have a background in psychology, been studying astrology for 40 years, applying it to the financial markets. I mean, this is really my forte, to be honest with you, when it comes to, I like to look at people's charts. Today we looked at Bill Gates, and I look political figures, and I'm decent in making those, analyzing those things. But this has been my concentration, is the financial markets. So anyway, that's it for today. I do consultations now and then. You can email me at astroindicator @gmail.com, and I do these somewhat irregularly. Last two have been on a weekly basis, but typically it's more bi-weekly, so consider subscribing if you'd like to be notified and all that. So anyway, thanks for listening. Bye for now.